Hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven. Our guest today is Brandon Smith. He has a number of roles and descriptors. He is an executive coach, he's an author, a speaker, he's a podcaster. He has a show called The Workplace Therapist. I've been a guest there back in April, and I'll link to that in the show notes. So it's really good to have Brandon here as a guest on this show. So before I tell you a little more about him, let's just first off say welcome, and it's good to see you again, Brandon. How are you?
Mark, really great to come on your show, and really good to see you. Yeah, I'd love to have you on my show. It was one of my favorite shows the last few months, so it's so good to now get to be on the other side of the coin.
Yeah, tables are turned. I mean, like it's not like, with the name of your show, it's not like I was on a virtual therapist couch. That didn't feel like a hot seat. That was a really good
Although it would have been
conversation.
interesting to do that.
Well, we'll talk more about what Brandon means by being a workplace therapist. It's not just a podcast, it's his work and his mission and a lot of what he does. So we'll learn more about that. But Brandon is the author of books, including his latest. It's called The Hot Sauce Principle: How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent all of the time. So I think we'll get into that a little bit later on as well. It's an interesting title. We'll see what that principle is and maybe a little bit about what we can do about it. Brandon is the founder and CEO of a company called the Worksmiths. He's the co-founder of the Leadership Foundry, and he is the adjunct faculty member at the Goizueta Business School at Emory University. So I'll work backwards on the degrees. Brandon has an MBA from Emory. He has an MS in clinical counseling from Georgia State University, which probably foreshadows the workplace therapist label. And he has a BA in communications from Vanderbilt University. So Brandon, before we sort of unpack later what it means to be a workplace therapist and maybe how you got into that, well, I don't know, maybe this is connected. I'm just going to ask the question we normally start with here. What is your favorite mistake?
So, Mark, I've actually been wrestling with this question for probably a good week. And just every moment I had, I'd be kicking around my head, which one of the thousands should I share?
That's why we've got to choose a favorite. Yeah.
So many, right? And it's like, I don't know, I can't really say I love them all equally, but there are right. So many. So I settled on one that I think is indicative of a broader challenge that I have. So it's kind of like a microcosm of a bigger theme that pops up. As I looked at all my children mistakes, they had some themes to them. So are you ready for me to jump in?
Yeah, and just to clarify, you're not saying your children are mistakes. You're just
no.
In a family tree of mistakes.
Yeah. There's family tree of mistakes. Actually, my wife, I told her, I was like, I'm about to go on Mark's show. She said, "You're not going to say having 3 kids is just a mistake, are you?" No, I'm not. Yeah, they're all teenagers right now, so they are being very teenagery at the moment, rolling their eyes on a regular basis at everything I say. Yeah. Well, parenting, that's a whole other ball game. I make plenty of mistakes over there. Plenty. That's a whole other show.
yeah, that would be. But anyway, so back to, as I derailed you there, but you're talking about there's the microcosm and the bigger picture. Please continue.
Yeah, so I'm staying in the professional world. So as I think about my career and the many mistakes I've made, there's one that kind of kept coming to mind for me. And so this was some years ago. So I'm going to kind of roll back the clock and really kind of tell this as a good story. Mm-hmm. So when I made the decision to basically start my own practice, and I had some offers to go join some traditional consulting firms, and I decided on the entrepreneurial life, one of the opportunities that I got was to teach more regularly in business schools. Mm-hmm. And so that turned out to be a very nice thing, because when I started my practice, it was 2005. So we kind of quickly rolled right into those 2008, 2009 years that many of us can remember as not the best years for the workplace, recessionary periods. So I ended up getting a good portion of my income came from my teaching. And it was adjunct, but it was pretty full time, to be frank. I mean, I was teaching regularly a lot of classes. And at one point, I was teaching at 2 different universities in their MBA programs. So it wouldn't be uncommon. I could probably do this when I was a younger guy, but it wouldn't be uncommon where I would teach, three sections of the class during the day, and then hop across town to the other university and then teach a night class for 4 hours. So long days, but I did a lot of that. Yeah. And so it was good. It represented a portion of my revenue and income. it was kind of as I would put it to people, it was like the bond in my portfolio. Right, because you go out and you find other consulting opportunities, executive coaching opportunities, but this was a stable bond because university is like that's going to keep coming every year.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. So I'm doing this work over these years, and my teaching load is picking up. And how it works in a business school is they typically start you off in maybe full-time MBA students, and then you might graduate to evening MBA students. And then if you're really fortunate, then they'll say, oh, we want you to do our executive MBA students, okay? Because that's all the faculty want to be there, because a lot of those folks can either bring you possible opportunities to do some consulting on the side, or you just learn a lot about what's going on, because these are folks a little more senior in their career. And if you really, really get fortunate, which I was able to get to this place and get lucky, which I got lucky, you get into executive education, which is another part of where business schools make money. That's when they have companies come in and they pay for programs. So I got to teach there, and I got paid additional kind of to do that. So all that sounds good on the surface. Well, here's where the mistake comes in. So the way business schools work and universities work is it's very much a caste system. So it is absolutely a hierarchical caste system based on your title in the school and your background. It's little to do with performance. I want to be very clear. It has everything to do with the political caste system. Yeah. So sitting on top is your tenured research faculty. They get to make all the decisions. Next in line goes your teaching faculty. These are the folks who are full-time, have PhDs, and they teach. After that might be kind of our administrators. They kind of come next. And then it might come, staff members, and then folks like me, which are adjunct faculty. So what was happening was I was getting all this work I was doing at the business school, but if another faculty member higher up in the caste system wanted something that I had, they could just take my lunch money. Yeah. They could just say, that's not fair, he shouldn't have that, and they would just give it to me, even though it wasn't so much about performance. And I'm just kind of stating the reason why they had me do these things was because the clients or the students liked me. During that stretch, I won about 12 teaching awards. So I was winning a lot of teaching awards. So here's this challenge I've got. I'm in this relationship, okay, with the business school and multiple business schools, and not feeling like I'm being treated particularly well. But if I was to be honest, I liked the security of that income, right? And I also liked being able to tell people, well, I teach at this business school, right? Or, because it opens doors and it makes sense to people, right? So there's that brand you get attached to. And even my folks, my dad is 87 years old and my mom's 84, they still don't really know what I do, Mark. But if I said, hey, I teach at a business school, they're like, oh, I get that. Like, he teaches at a business school, right? So where my mistake came in was I essentially traded off greater opportunities and freedom to really make a bigger impact and really build my businesses for the safety and security of those roles. Even though I was being, from my perspective, not treated as fairly or as equitably as I probably should have, because it is so political. Yeah. And so I stayed in that bad relationship for probably 3 or 4 years too long. And then one day I said, this isn't what I want. So when the time to renew my contract came up, I just declined. I said, nope. So I just turned and walked away from that. And of course they said, well, why? I don't understand. I said, well, because, I'm going to turn this away for the possibility that I'm going to fill my time with other things. But just as I said, with the possibility, it could have been that nothing else came. But as you've probably seen in your career and heard talking to your other clients, and I'd always heard, but deep down, not sure if I really believed it, better things would fill that time, right? And it did. Better things came and filled that time, and it gave me more opportunity to launch another business and do more things that I would never have been able to do had I stayed in that relationship. Yeah. So it really was about this pattern that I have of trying to make relationships work that maybe aren't really set up for what I want going forward, and staying in them too long. And that was a great example. It turned out when I finally did it, it did open a bunch of doors for me, but I kicked myself that I didn't do it about 3 or 4 years earlier.
Yeah. Well, and at that point, the economy was hitting a better stride. Things were more positive. It seemed like that would be a good bet to place on yourself, as opposed to, I mean, I guess it could have played out, and I'm glad it didn't play out this way. You might have looked back and said it was a mistake to leave that stable, secure situation. But again, what I'm hearing you saying is you wish you had made that, placed that bet on yourself a couple of years earlier.
And it's challenging because you make that leap of faith, and it's not like I've got a whole bunch of folks in my corner saying, "Hey, that's a great decision." Most folks are saying, "Are you sure you want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Are you really sure you want to do that?" Because there's so much like just security and staying there.
Yeah. So so other people thought it was a mistake. Were they telling you that point blank? They were kind of hinting at it.
Yeah, they were. Other people, said, hinting at it. No, my 87-year-old dad was very much clearly saying it's a mistake. Like, you shouldn't do that. But yeah, a lot of other folks just they didn't understand it. They thought it would be better to stay in that safe place. Yeah. But it just wasn't working for me. I wasn't feeling appreciated and fulfilled, and I was feeling a little bit constrained on other things I might want to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, was there a particular trigger for realizing, okay, hey, this is a mistake. This has been a mistake to stay this long, or did it build up gradually to a point where it reached a tipping point of, okay, the reasons to leave are clearly now outweighing the reasons to stay?
There was a trigger. There was a trigger. I'm specifically not naming names for many, many reasons.
Sure.
So I had a particular nemesis faculty member that just for whatever reason did not like that I was getting opportunities that he was not. Okay. And so it came time to restructure and set course requirements for the year. And the way full-time faculty work is you have to have a certain number of teaching hours. Okay. And you map your class load to those teaching hours. Okay. Well, they weren't able to fill one of the cohorts of students enough for this faculty member to have enough teaching hours. So he went hunting for classes, and he found a class that I teach every year. And he said, well, I want his class because I need it to fulfill my contract.
Yeah.
Now, this was a class that I was asked to design and create about 10 years ago, and I did. And it gets the highest reviews in every single of all the evening students every year.
Yeah.
And they gave it to him. They just took the class that I created, I designed,
wow.
and all the students loved, and just handed it over to him. And they not only did they not fight for me or support me, they just let him just take my lunch money.
Wow.
So I said,
and what was the class? Sorry to interrupt.
It was a leadership communication class, but the specific focus of the class was, because I really wanted to tailor it into where the students were in their career. It was, how do you get recognized as a high potential your first year after graduating with your MBA? Mm-hmm. That was the targeted focus of the class. That was the kind of the subtitle. And so everything was designed around learning how to lead within complex organization and influence and get recognized. And through even the assignments I gave the students, 20% of the students would get promotions going through that class, almost within 6 months or less. Yeah. So it was a great class. You can tell I'm passionate about it. Well,
right.
Until it got taken away from me. So there was a tipping point, Mark. That was it.
Okay. Now, I'm curious, one other thing you said is that there was a pattern. I assume, were there previous jobs where you had also tried sticking it out too longer than you should have before moving on, other previous steps in your career path?
There had been. So, see, this is one of the catch-22s I think we probably all have as people. I'm a relational guy. I love building relationships with my clients. I love having long-term relationships with them. I'm a therapist by training. Mm-hmm. So, working with people and building those relationships is very important to me. And while that can be a good thing, some relationships just aren't meant for long-term. They're just not. Mm-hmm. So early on when I finished my MBA, I had a business partner that I worked with, and he was an amazing person, but not a very good business partner. So talented guy, but would have a hard time sending off invoices which, as you know, in business, that's kind of a critical that's kind of a critical thing.
That's a mistake to not send invoices, right?
He would wait 3, 4, 5 months till he would send out an invoice, and when you send out an invoice, that doesn't signal when you're going to get paid. It signals when you're going to start the follow-up process, right? Because you get paid at all different rates. So he had a hard time with that. He would kind of get stuck and have a hard time just like getting things done. He would want me to come over and sit with him in his office while he would work. It was just a very clunky, cumbersome relationship. And we basically kind of worked through that. And I stayed in that until eventually we got into the recessionary period. And he said, I think I want to go do something else. And I said, well, okay, well, good luck to that. But that was 3 years, and it was probably longer than I needed to. So that was kind of one of the initial starting places. But I've had many kind of more examples of that where, as I sit back and I say, that those are cases where I probably should have tried to move on quicker. And sometimes I've learned from that, which has been good.
Right. Well, and that's the key here. And that's what we talk about. It's not lamenting over the mistakes. It's about the learning that comes from them. And I won't get into it because it's your guest and it's your stories, but just by comparison, you made me reflect. My first job out of college and then my first job out of business school, I probably left those jobs a little sooner than I should have. It wasn't a huge mistake to leave, but I was sort of at the other end of the spectrum where part of me says, if I had stuck it out maybe one more year, I probably would have made the same decision to leave.
Yeah.
But, I don't know if that was just, being young and impatient or idealistic or all of the above.
Yeah.
But,
that's interesting. That's interesting. You had kind of the flip experience as you reflect back.
And some of that has changed. I don't know if that's learning or just maturing or who knows. But anyway, you made me think about that, and I just wanted to say it and put the thought aside, and I'll ponder that a little. I'll think about that a little bit more over the weekend.
They often talk in managerial accounting. They often talk about sunk costs. Mm-hmm. Right? You've probably heard that term before, right? Yes. So it's like we get so invested. It's like, well, then just 3 more. I'll throw a few more bucks at it, and I'll make it work. I've already got $100,000 in, a few more thousand. Then it'll turn the corner. And I think there's a line somewhere for me, where if I can make the decision before there's too much cost invested, then I'm okay. But once we get into sunk cost territory, I'll tend to stay in it longer than I should. So it's trying. My life journey is trying to figure out that line and make the right decisions at the right time.
Yeah. And at the time, it feels like the right decision. And sometimes hindsight proves that to be true. And sometimes hindsight makes us think about what if, but no huge regrets there. But anyway, I want to bring it back to your role and what you do is describing yourself as a workplace therapist, because I know from your background, again, for the audience, a master's in clinical counseling. It looks like from your profile that you spent a lot of time doing that, traditional counseling with individuals who are facing different challenges in their lives. What was the spark and the genesis of becoming, as you describe yourself, a workplace therapist? How did that come to be, and what do you mean by that phrase, workplace therapist?
Yeah. Okay. So that's two-part question that's going to require 2 different stories. Okay.
Yeah,
so
let's
do the first story.
I make a mistake sometimes in jamming a bunch of questions together into one.
You might not realize there's actually 2 stories there. So the first story is, how did I go down this path? And then we'll talk about the handle. Okay. So I didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated college. I graduated with a communications degree. And I always tell folks, like most good communication majors, I was unemployed at graduation, wondering, what am I going to do with this thing? And I fumbled around, and I got a job with a small chain of retail stores. It was a family-owned business. They had 15 stores. And I was going to be the assistant manager of one of those stores. And so my boss was the son-in-law of the business. So the woman who started the business, her daughter marries this guy. He's my boss. So I get to work the first day. He greets me at the door, and he says, "Hey, before you get started, I've got tasks for you. Waiting for you in the back room is the current assistant manager of the store. But he doesn't know you're coming. So you have to go back there and fire him, and you get his job."
Oh, boy.
So I'd worked other jobs before, but this is my first full-time job, right, out of college. First full-time job. So that's what I had to do. And that's how my boss would roll. He'd come in. He loved to do all the things we learned not to do as leaders. He loved surprise visits to try and catch you doing something wrong. So he makes surprise visits in the store, and he'd go in the back with me, be like, "I don't like what Susan's wearing. Go fire her." So I had to do more layoffs in the first 6 months of that job than any other time in my career.
Yeah.
And that experience kind of woke me up. It made me realize a couple things. First, it made me realize, work should not have to suck. It shouldn't be this place of anxiety and depression. I mean, it is work. I get that. But it should be a place of more fulfillment, success, impact, purpose, those kinds of things. Like feeling like you're making a difference in everything you do. Second, if my boss was any indication of the state of leadership in the world, I really wanted to change that.
Right.
And third, that was where my kind of purpose was born, that I wanted to kind of eliminate all workplace dysfunction everywhere forever, make workplaces smoother and healthier and less bumpy.
Yeah.
Having no idea what I'd signed up for. And so that really set me off on the path of getting my clinical degree, because back in those days, there wasn't a lot of executive coaching certificates. If you wanted to be an executive coach, you kind of had to create your own path. So I chose a clinical path first to get my skills solid, and then worked in the corporate world for a while to understand that language, and then moved and got my MBA, and kind of, the rest is history. So it was really that first job that was like the spark for me that said, wow, no one should have to go through this. And I have a feeling a lot of people are. I want to fix that.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. And there is a lot of similarity to that point. And I remember we were able to talk about that back on your podcast, this idea. That was my big takeaway from my first job out of college. People shouldn't hate coming to work. Different way of saying the same thing.
Yeah. And so I wanted to fix that, and particularly recognize the impact that the leader has. So I do it through people. I mean, you can do it through systems, you can do it through structures. I do it a lot through people, because I would notice then I became, while I was there, then I got elevated to manager, and I get a phone call and they'd be like, yeah, you got to move to this other store, because they all walked out because my boss, came in there and they were so mad at him, they just staged a mass walkout. So there's currently no employees at that store anymore. So I would have to go fill in. So he created so much havoc.
Yeah.
It's kind of hold what's the Socratic oath? Do no harm, right? It's like
the Hippocratic Oath.
Hippocratic
oath. It's related. The first do no harm. It's related idea. Right.
Yeah. So is that whole idea like it's like had he not been there, things would have been smoother. Like every time he showed up, he would create. It's like the business would have been better if he was just on vacation year round, not walking in. So that's I was going to say, so that's the first story, but then where the handle comes in, that's another story.
Okay. I mean, that really sounds like elements halfway between the movie Office Space and the show The Office, but maybe without the humor, maybe just the cringeworthy, what WTF, why are you that way moments.
I think people relate to that movie and that show in particular so well because it is so real. Yeah. I mean, we watch it as if it's, we pretend like it's not real, but I have met people like Michael Scott, and they are kind-hearted people, but they say things every day that you just say, what, really? Why did you think that was a good idea to say that? But they don't know better.
Right. So do you end up now as a workplace therapist being brought in to help people like that? Or so I'm curious, let's talk more about the phrase. Are you a therapist for the organization kind of broadly, or for people within workplace challenges as opposed to, let's say, issues with personal life?
I don't know what the phrase means to people. I know people like it. So let me tell you where it came from. So back when I was teaching more actively at that university I mentioned, a local NPR affiliate reached out to the university and said, hey, we need a guest to come on a show we have every Friday. It's called At Work. It's a call-in show on the regional NPR affiliates. So I went on that week and they said, oh my gosh, that was great. We really liked having you. Come back next week. Okay. That went on for 2 years. For 2 years, every week I would go on, and eventually I became the host of that show for a period of time. And I had another guest who would come on the show, and he also called himself an executive coach. But he couldn't have been more different from me. He was like the bizarro Brandon. Okay, he would yell at callers. He didn't listen at all. It was just weird. And so one day I found myself trying to explain how I was, even though we both said we're executive coaches, how we're different. And I said, I'm a lot more like a workplace therapist.
Yeah.
And the person I said that to, their eyes lit up and they were like, I totally get that. And they just started talking to me all about what was going on in their workplace. And I tested that handle for about 6 months, and sure enough, it was more like that's how the world saw me and who the world needed me to be. Now, what I do when I'm working in the world is really trying to make people, teams, and organizations, function better together. Throw less elbows and step on toes a lot less.
Yeah.
So when I'm working with an individual leader, that's through the executive coaching. That may be a leader who just got promoted. It's a happy coaching, or it may be a leader that needs to, they've thrown a few too many elbows, and I've got to help them learn how to share their toys a little better.
Yeah.
It could be teams that maybe aren't getting along as well as they could, or want to get along better. And then it could just simply be, hey, just give all of our leaders some more tools to make them, a little bit smoother as they kind of take folks forward. Yeah. So it takes lots of different forms, but that's essentially what that handle looks like. The workplace therapist kind of handle in practice for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like there are a couple groups of workplace therapy clients. There are those maybe who choose to engage with you, and those who are told to engage with you. Either,
That's
hey,
correct.
You're promoted, happy times, here's a coach. And they might say, oh, I don't know if I need a coach. Or I imagine it's got to be harder in that more remedial case where it's in response to a problem.
Yeah.
What's the difference in approach when someone's or how do you figure out when someone is willing to lean into it versus someone's there because they have to be?
Yeah, so you're right. It is different. In the cases where I've got to help someone make some changes in order for this to be a long-term relationship for them in their job. In other words, keep their job. The most important thing is they've got to raise their hand and say, "I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to put in the hard work." Because, I'll give you another analogy. Have you ever played golf before, Mark?
A couple of times as an adult, and I just didn't take to it. I decided I wasn't going to put in the effort there.
It's really, you have to put an effort to play that sport. It's a frustrating game. I don't play anymore. But I've gone through the process of taking golf lessons years ago. And they're the most uncomfortable lesson to take, because then the first thing they do is, however you hold the golf club, they say, oh, that's all wrong. And they give you this weird way of holding it where you're like overlapping and lacing over your fingers that no normal human would ever do. Okay. But it's designed to get you to hit that ball a little bit to the right, so it has a little bit of a draw, so it rolls better when it hits the ground. Okay. Well, in many cases, coaching is the same way. I'm going to ask you to do something that feels really unnatural to you. It might not be unnatural to the next guy, but it's unnatural to you. And so you've got to be able to put forth that effort. So they've got to be willing to do that. So A, they've got to say, I'm willing to do it. And B, simply put, do they do it? Between our calls, are they putting forth the effort and trying to make those changes happen? My job is to make that as easy as possible and support them, but they've got to put forth the effort. It's when I don't see that then I might say, maybe they're not completely ready for this.
Yeah.
But 95% of the time, the folks I work with do really want to genuinely get better, and they are willing to get that kind of support and help.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I think when you use that golf example, I could think of different professional situations where, somebody is very, maybe say resistant to expertise. And there's this catch-22 of like, you've brought me in, or you've brought somebody in for some sort of expertise. And now you're saying, well, no, this way works for me. Like, so people might say, yeah, okay. Yeah, you're teaching me that. It feels uncomfortable. I'm going to go play a bunch of rounds this week. And Brandon's not looking, so I'm going to do it my way. And the same might be true in workplaces where somebody might look to, they just might be stuck in a habit. They might disagree with the advice, and rather than trying it, they'll just say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's hard to work through.
Yeah. But I guess the irony in all that is, whoever's brought in has got the same goals and objectives as the person who brought them in. Mm-hmm. I want to make you better. Mm-hmm. I want to help you achieve the results you want. And I'm giving you a path there. But at the end of the day, it's up to them to kind of walk down the path. They've got to do it.
Now, you triggered my thoughts to leaving. I won't say which company. I've left a couple companies. So, but as I was having this doubt of, should I have stuck it out longer? I'm having actually more of a flashback here where in this one job, I was struggling so much with finding my place, sticking it out, making it work versus saying, this just isn't a fit. This place isn't aligned with me. I should just get out. And so I utilized the company's EAP program and went and saw a therapist in their office, offsite, one-on-one. Long story short, this therapist said, you wouldn't believe how many people I talked to from the company. I'm paraphrasing. This is my memory of it. That place is toxic and you should get out.
Like, wow.
I mean, it was surprisingly direct. I think she was saying like your instincts, or I mean, she was, I think, in a way reaffirming. I wanted to leave. Don't think you're wrong for wanting that. Again, this is my fuzzy old memory of it, but
it's good because she's trying to reaffirm your gut instinct and not have you feel like you're being gaslit, right? That you think that you're in this place and they're thinking, no, it's just you, Mark. You're crazy. Everybody around here finds this.
Well, I think there's that self-reflection of like, what's wrong with me that I don't fit in here? And I think she validated, no, there's probably nothing. I mean, there might be something wrong with me, but that's maybe not, there's something I could improve about myself. Let me put it that way. But I don't think that was the core. If she was saying, company's broken, a lot of people leave and for good reason. Yeah. So I'll stop second guessing that maybe. Now that I remember that context. But so Brandon, before we wrap up, let's talk about your book. Another catchy phrase, memorable phrase, the hot sauce principle. Where does that come from? I think of hot sauce, and some people say there's even an ad for one of the hot sauces about putting that on everything. I think they even bleep out. They put that bleep on
Frank's
everything.
Hot sauce. That's
Frank's hot sauce.
And I always, when I would talk about this concept, I was Tabasco must love me. If you've ever been in a hotel, you've probably seen these little tiny Tabasco bottles. You can get like the brunch buffets, and so I buy these in bulk and I would hand them out to people. And here's the idea behind the concept. So the concept is urgency is just like hot sauce. And in earlier days, let's go back 15, 20 years ago, in the change management space, a lot of experts, John Cotter included, would say the first step of driving any change is you have to have a high enough sense of urgency. Mm-hmm. Come on, managers, you got to create some urgency.
The burning platform.
The burning platform. And that's true whether I'm talking about getting one of my coaching clients to change, or you're trying to get a whole organization to adopt a new system or process, right?
Sure.
Change is hard. Well, if we now come up to today, that's no longer, the issue is no longer we need enough urgency around here. The issue is we need focused urgency. Mm-hmm. Because we live in a world where time's our most precious resource, not money, and everything's urgent all the time. I mean, that's consistently, I hear that from every person I talk to, no matter where they are in the globe, no matter what kind of work they do, for profit or nonprofit. They feel like everything that's being pushed onto them is covered in hot sauce.
Yeah.
It's like everything coming out of the kitchen is doused in this stuff, right? The appetizer, the entree, the salad.
It's burning your eyes and making
it's burning your eyes. You're sweating profusely. And so you don't want it on everything. So the principle behind the book is learning how to use this properly. Okay, because hot sauce in the right amounts, in the right places, adds focus, adds priority, adds flavor, right? But if you cover everything in it, it creates overwhelm. So the book is about, as a leader, how you do it properly, but also as someone who's in an organization and has leaders or customers, creating urgency. How do you properly manage those demands? So you and your team just don't get completely burned up.
It seems like there might be a parallel. I can handle Tabasco. I like Cholula. I like Sriracha. My dad, I think, has a gene that I did not inherit, where he can eat stuff that is just atomically hot, like signing a waiver because it's so hot, wings or hot sauce. But I wonder, so the organizational parallel I'm thinking of is like, when you consume enough hot sauce, do you become numb to it? And do you have to then somehow up the Scoville units of the hot sauce?
I think it's a great analogy. I think that's absolutely right. So that's part of the challenge that organizations are having right now. They're numb to it. Someone throws another thing urgent on your plate, you're numb to it. Oh, really? Another one? I just got 3 yesterday and 4 the day before that. So is it really urgent? Well, I'll get to it when I get to it. So what really needs to happen is probably, first of all, probably less, right? Probably less. And then what you do use it on be focused. So I'll tell you a great story that it's in the book. It came from a client of mine. So several years ago, I was telling him about this. He was an entrepreneur. He had a software business. He had about 50 employees. And the most anxious entrepreneur I'd ever met before, Mark. I mean, the guy was like, you could almost see him vibrating when he was in front of you. He was so anxious. And his employees told me, it's like he's creating so much anxiety because he worries about everything all the time and everything is urgent. So I told him this analogy. Well, on his own, he went out and went to the grocery store and he bought 3 big bottles of hot sauce and stuck them on his desk. 1, 2, 3. And then whenever there was a new initiative or project that was urgent, he would hand one of the bottles to the owner of that initiative and said, keep the bottle until the project is done, and then give me back the bottle. But you got to hold on to the bottle till the project is done. And why that was so brilliant is he only had 3 bottles. Mm-hmm. Only 3 things could be urgent at a time.
Right.
So I think the first starting place for organizations is let's get our taste buds back, and let's pull back on not making everything urgent, and then be a little more intentional on turning up the Scoville units on the ones that really are.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny when you talk about heat and having to prioritize. The one company that I left was a manufacturing company, and working in logistics and supply chain, and they would have what they called it the hot list of like, these were the most urgent expedited orders based on customers who had complained and most important customers and what have you. And that hot list was so big that then there was another list that had the founder CEO's name. It was the blank list because that was the hottest of the hot. So they fell into that same trap. You can't make too many orders high priority because then basically nothing is.
Yeah. Yeah. As human beings and people, we tend to work really well off of 3 to 5.
Yeah.
3 to 5 things. Our brains hold 3 to 5 really well. I mean, think about all the things in the world that are 3s. You know, I mean, it can be both in the spiritual world to just the practical world. 3s, lots of things come in 3s. And part of the reason why is because it works really well for the way our brains are made.
Yeah.
It's not 33. It's 3. Yeah. So, you know, keeping those things, you know, the irony is the shorter the list, the more we're going to get accomplished. I think that's the irony in it, you know, because it's focused, everyone is aligned, they're all marching down the same path versus like spinning around in circles.
Well, you can get a couple of things done and then move on to the next ones, as opposed to having just the swirl of distraction.
Yeah, and get that sense of accomplishment. That's the other thing that I hear so often from leaders right now. Because everything's urgent, I don't ever feel like I'm ever getting anything accomplished. Yeah, I'm never checking anything off completely and then getting a moment to pause and celebrate before I go on to the next thing. Yeah. So it's managing it that way.
Yeah. So if as a listener you're making the mistake of bathing in a tub full of hot sauce, learn to use hot sauce as a condiment, not the main. Yeah, nobody drinks a bottle of hot sauce for dinner. Hopefully not
the soup.
Not the soup. There you go. Well, thank you, Brandon. Our guest again has been Brandon Smith. As he describes himself, and his podcast are called The Workplace Therapist. Well, I'll put links to everything in the show notes, but where can people find you online, Brandon?
You know, the easiest way, Mark, is just Google The Workplace Therapist. I'm the only one. That's the easiest way. And that site is all free resources. It's my blog, podcast, articles, all there designed to help folks be better leaders and have healthier workplaces. And then, of course, if they ever wanted to get additional help and wanted to work with me directly, you can contact me through that site or go to the Worksmiths, just like the blacksmiths, but the Worksmiths. And that's another opportunity for me to assist in any way that I can.
All right. Well, very good. Brandon, thank you for sharing everything that you did today. Lots to think about and really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Mark, thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it.